Hi, and welcome to the Leader's Edge, our weekly live interview show where we feature successful CEOs and professionals who are so kind to share their stories with us. In so doing, we bring awareness, inspiration, and leadership tips for you to action to help you sharpen your competitive advantage and make a positive impact in your organization and community. So, this week, we are talking about starting smart, the do's and don'ts for when we are starting in a leadership position for new teams. Of course, most of us know when we're starting, we're excited. We want to we have a lot of ideas. We want to make things happen. We want to show results. Diving in, right? Head first most of the time. But before we dive in, um, we wanna talk about ways or tips to help you guarantee that success. So that's where Stephen De Gannes comes in because he has had a career where he had made many changes over his time and in different functions, right? So I'm gonna dive in a little bit to let you know about Stephen's bio. Stephen is a qualified. He's qualified as an electrical engineer, and that was really early in his career. And of course, he moved into sales and marketing part of this field. I think it's part of Trini thing where most of us end up in sales and marketing, or I think in any job, we end up in sales and marketing.
Exactly.
So he found himself excelling and was given responsibilities for major customers, which grew to him being asked to take on more and more senior roles, and eventually general management in companies that were actually not performing as expected. And then he was able to exercise these turnaround strategies that he got from his wonderful training at the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. And what that resulted in was in conversion to greater profitability of these organizations. So the turnarounds did occur. And of course, he shared greater staff morale, which is what really drives enterprise. So, Stephen, in talking to us about starting smart, I'm going to let Georgia jump in here and kick us off with the first question.
Ah, great. Thank you so much, Emily. Stephen, it's nice to have you on Monday morning. Your background is interesting, Stephen. So from electrical engineering, and you've moved into several different companies. And in all of that experience, I'm sure that there was a beginning. Either you were the first person moving into that role, or you were moving into a new team. So it's a start. So Stephen, talk to us about how you've been able to manage over these years with so many different beginnings. Give us a story to start us off.
All right. Well, as Emily said earlier on, I did start off in electrical engineering and quickly moved into sales and marketing. I think every aspect of any job does carry an element of sales and marketing because as long as you are doing a service and you are relating to general public, you must represent your organization correctly. You must have that way of making sure that people are comfortable being in an organization that you represent. And as a result, everyone is a sales and marketing. Perhaps we're not selling a product, but we're certainly selling ourselves to our clients. So yes, Emily, you're right in that respect. All of us, no matter what position we are in an organization, do have an element of sales and marketing.
Mhm.
Now, to answer your question, Georgia, when I got into that role of sales and marketing, representing the organization and seeing a need for people not to be exposed to as much negatives as could be possible or are present in an organization and really focus on the positives, that's when I started to see, well, there's so much more to offer that we can talk about in a very good way instead of the one or two negative. The old take the plank out of the eye so that you can see the splint in your friends.
Yeah.
So I still try to embark on that type of activity. So getting into a new organization, you don't always assume the worst. People tell you when you start getting into a new organization, you're going to meet this, you're going to have that. You have to watch out for this particular individual. That one is only here to bring you down, etc., etc. You
Mhm.
need to go into an organization and get the feel for the culture yourself. Don't be guided. Be aware that it exists, and certainly you can take these guides from the people who are providing them. But you know what? They're not necessarily there their motives are. So the best thing really is to go in there, feel the organization out, and then determine how you're going to deal with it. Because you didn't get to that position by just trying random types of solutions. You know that they're built on some type of theory, and you need to focus on that theory and see how it's going to work for you. But you must understand the lay of the land before proceeding.
So, Stephen, what are some of the things that you would say to people to do? And then we'll talk about the don'ts.
All right. Get to know your staff, especially
Right.
the ones that are in the upper level, and definitely you need to go down to all levels eventually. In a huge organization, that becomes difficult to meet everyone. But I remember going into one of my particular organizations where we had a staff of 50, and I did meet with every single person over the course of maybe about 5 to 6 months. I
Mm-hmm.
met with the ones that were, I walked around it continuously. I mean, that was the years of the Fitbit when the Fitbit first came in and they said, oh, you could try and make 10,000 steps in a day and
That's
you'll lose weight, which I need to do. And I still have something, well, I don't have it on today, but yeah, I still do that. And I spent so much time walking around and just meeting these 50 people and finding out what they did on a daily basis. I did 10,000 steps guaranteed every day. It was not a problem. So I would walk around. Of course, I would check in with my managers. I never got to doing my own email until about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning when I got in at 7:30, because I spent the first hour just talking to people and understanding, and not necessarily official meetings, but sitting down and talking to someone for 5 minutes and finding out what they're working on that day, just to make sure that, we are all in current and they understand they can approach me if they have any problems, and I would like them to do. And I remember there was one particular guy I realized I had not got around to speaking, and he had been with the company about 3 or 4 months at that time. And I suddenly said, hey, what about, I think his name was Roger or something like that. I said, what about Roger? So I called the HR person. I said, I'm the operations manager to which he reported. I said, I'd like to meet with Roger. Could you arrange to have him come in at 2 o'clock this afternoon to my office? And he said, sure. He told Roger, who went out for lunch and then came back and said he was ill and he was going home. So Roger decided he did not know why the CEO was calling to meet with him, and decided he would go home because he thought he had done something wrong. So he came to it the next day, and I said, well, what happened yesterday? He says, well, I was feeling ill. I said, really? Is that what it was? He said, well, then he admitted why he really went to. I said, I didn't want to come to meet with you to admonish you on anything, really, just to understand that you know your role in the organization and in the marketing areas and things like that. But I try to be as approachable as possible. And as a result of that, allow people to come to. Now, it does take a lot of your time, of course. It does take a toll when
yeah.
everybody feels that they can come speak to you, and then you have to measure that and determine the seriousness or the gravity of the particular the topic that you're going to be talking on. If it's just someone coming to waste your time, or sorry, not waste your time, but just to spend a little 5 minutes with you, that's fine. When it goes on far longer than that and you have work to do, you can just reschedule. Hey, let's talk during lunchtime. I'll meet you after work. We could do something after work. We can have a little chat in the car park when we're
Right.
leaving, whatever. But it's very important that everybody feels like an individual, that they really are contributing to an organization, and that what they have to say can be heard, provided it's worthwhile, and they're strong about it.
Right. So one strong do, Georgia, what Stephen is saying is be available, be open, especially I think especially in the beginning, but I guess throughout, right? Because you don't want to just start off strong, hot and sweaty, as we say, and then fizzle out where you're always in your office and nobody can see you
Behind
ever.
the door. That's
Yes.
another thing. My door is traditionally open. Even if it's a glass door, it's traditionally open. The only time I close it is when I'm having a private meeting with someone or if I'm at a conference like this. That's why the door is closed. But typically, my door is open because I never want to give the impression that I'm not able to be contacted if I need to. At the same time, I do not like to hover over people. I like to speak with them, find out what their task is, maybe assign them something, and then I leave them alone. If they need any help, my door is open. You can always come and speak to me. And that's because it was also how it was shared with me. I had a couple of good leaders in my life that also I learned quite a bit from. That was my time at board communications and a couple other areas. And if you remember board communications, But I had several good managers there, and the doors were always open. You could always stick your head in and find out if you're doing the right thing, but don't waste their time. They're available, but don't waste their time. And I try to be the same way.
Right. That's always one of the challenges, Emily and Stephen, with that balance. You want to connect with your people, but you also want to have time to do other things. You don't want to become that CEO who you start out strong and then you become Casper. Nobody sees you anymore. You become that ghost. Yes. So that
Exactly.
No,
was
in many cases, sorry,
yeah, that was
I was
one of the
saying in many
challenges.
cases, yeah, in many cases, I would sit down to do my work at around after I've walked around the organization. I would sit down to do my work in about maybe an hour after I've got in, and I probably may not be as effective at responding to the things I need to respond to until in the afternoon period because you're still dealing with people who are coming by to discuss
Right.
a particular project or to check your response on something. So quite often I may sit down in my previous one of my previous jobs just recently. I never actually got an opportunity to really clear up my correspondence until maybe about 3 p.m. in the 3 p.m. Like, and then I would be there until 5 or 6 or 7 just finishing off the day, which was a little bit tiring, but you felt good at the end of the day because you had done so much. And the staff were all happy and people were all working together and getting the entire project done
Yeah.
for the organization.
Yeah. So I guess if you see yourself as trying to keep everybody on the same track, aligned and so on, spending that time in the morning to make sure that we're all on the same page is an important
Yeah.
duty in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Talk to us about I remember when we had our a pre-conversation, we talked about humility, judgment, and trust. So take one. Because I'm no
All
teacher.
right.
I'm like, I just wanted in terms of the do's, and then well, I guess the don'ts will kind of speak for themselves, but we could just summarize them after.
It's a humility. Let's start with humility. Every one of us breathes the same way. We depend on the same oxygen and we have the same type of blood running through us, even if it may be slightly varied.
Mhm.
So become accustomed to when I first go into an organization, people say, "Oh, you're the CEO, you're the CEO," and the CEO really is just another person who has been exposed to things that you may not have been exposed to, and perhaps has a different type of understanding of how to get to solve particular problems. But the CEO really is the same as everyone else. You may be much better, and you are probably much better at your area of specificity, whatever the word may be. I'm sorry,
Yes,
but
sir.
you are probably far better at that level of detail than the CEO would be, unless, of course, I've just come from that same position.
Hmm.
So I'm more than likely going to have to learn from you in order to get the job done properly.
Mhm.
So there's no reason for you to feel sub to the CEO in that respect. And that's something that people always have, not all people, but quite a few people have a difficult time understanding that, just another person, just another human being, but in a different role. So that humility has to be there. Of course, when there's a need to make a decision, then the CEO is called upon, and of course, then his or her role becomes a little bit more under the microscope. And in that case, it's a little different. But you have to remain humble. You're just the same as everyone else, and you're just called upon to make a particular decision at a particular time, and that's something you have to be mindful of.
Yeah, and I
With
remember you
respect
said,
to, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, and I remember you said, especially when you're starting out, because you are thinking, like you said, you're excited about wanting to make a change, make an impact. So you might end up being this bull in the china shop kind of leader. Instead of taking the time to listen, instead of taking the time to be humble and recognize that you don't know everything, you know?
Yeah, that's a
So,
very key part of it. A big
yeah,
key part of going into an organization very early on. If you do not understand what
yeah,
some of the issues are before
yeah,
you actually start to change them, you may
yeah,
end up one going in a totally wrong direction, and two upsetting quite a few people in the organization that
Yes.
are now going to pull against you instead of with you. So you
right,
need to understand people and their particular needs and nuances so that you can all develop that alignment, the same magnetism type thing where you all pull in the same direction instead of opposing each other. You
yes,
start going together. And that's that's really key to turning an organization around. You cannot turn an organization around when you have 30 to 40% people pulling against the organization. I was introduced to an organization recently where it was said that a study was done, and it was said that perhaps maybe 80% of the organization, no, I don't exaggerate, maybe about 50% of the organization was pulling against leadership, and about 30% were actually just on the fence. So conversion of that organization to pull in the same direction took a little bit longer, but when they develop your trust, and this is very key, Emily and Aisha, if they develop your trust and you're able to show that you are genuine in your delivery, you find that people will come to work with you. They may have been, given a bad example before, or may have been betrayed previously. But if you get their trust fairly early on, then they will work with you, and they will come with you, and they will do what you need them to do eventually. Yeah. So it's just a matter of how long it takes sometimes. In an organization that has been, as an example, another friend gave me, if you kick a dog 20 times, the 21st time that you call them and you say, hey, come, they're not going to come. They're going to take a little while before they trust you and come back again.
Yeah.
However, if the dog has never been exposed to that and you call them, they will come immediately. It's the same thing. Human beings, not to say with dogs, but we have traits. If I don't trust you, I'm not going to be willing to come along with you unless I can gain that trust.
Correct.
Good. So,
Jojo?
you want Stephen to jump in now and tell us one of the don'ts?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, don't. Let's see. There's so many don'ts. Don't just assume that your theory is going to fit every single thing, every single organization that you work into. It may have worked perfectly in one. It may be absolutely the same type of application you would expect, but you try to apply it and you realize that it's not going to work, or it is not working when you try to apply it. One size does not fit all. When you are exposed or when you are trained in certain areas, you must realize that everybody is different. And as a result, the cumulative culture is different. So learn the organization. You must learn the organization before you even try to change anything. Of course, if there's some glaring holes that you need to patch quickly, then you have to apply to those. I'll give you an example of that. I joined an organization once and they told me, it's a perfectly working organization. We just want you to keep running it just exactly the way it is. And, everything will be fine. I thought, well, great. I think that's wonderful. I'll come into an organization and then I'll start off. I'll have an easy start and then we can see how we move to better levels from that.
Right.
The first month came along and the previous general manager came to me and said, we have no money to pay salaries. So I looked at him in surprise and I said, but I don't understand. I was told that we already made our budget for the year and then only to find out the bank account was empty. So that was my first month. I'd been working there 3 weeks because I started after the first week of the month. So we were supported by a foreign entity and they sent the money and we paid checks. And I had a meeting with two of the owners of the local partners of the company. And I said, that will never happen again. That should never happen in an organization that has financial capabilities that we have. Only to find out the problem was that our accounts receivable were a total mess.
Right.
So the person whose responsibility was for accounts receivable was doing a very poor job. So within a week or so, or within the first day after I found out about the receivables issues, I called her in and I said, so I need to know why we're not collecting. And I got so many poor excuses. I had daily meetings with her. We never had that issue again. We started repatriating money to the US parent and company instead. And then eventually she left because I didn't ask her to leave. I didn't suggest she left or anything like that. But because I was now looking at her activities, she no longer felt comfortable doing what she was doing before, which was very little, and she had to leave the organization. We never had the problem of not having salaries anymore. And we went from when I first started, we actually tripled to when I left the revenues. So I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy the success. Just allow a little bit of, flexibility so that we can all work together and do what we're supposed to do in order to get it done.
Good.
Awesome.
I'm hoping that those who are watching and those listening would recognize that there's, as you said, Stephen, there's no one size that fits all. You're going to be thrown in different situations and you'll have to learn to swim. But you have to have that life vest that helps you. So it's your knowledge, it's the connections that you're making with people, so many different things that you have to use. So as a leader, we don't have one tool in our toolkit. So I
No.
appreciate what you're saying, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, so yeah, so we want to wrap because we're a little over time, but this has been an enjoyable conversation, and I feel like we just started. Like we could continue on for a little bit. So, I mean, Stephen, I want to thank you, and I'm for the audience perspective, Georgia, the actions. So remember the do's, the humility, the listening, the connecting with people. When you're leading an organization or a team, that is so critical. It is not wasting time. And as Stephen said, I like the idea when people are you think wasting your time, you could deflect that and say, let's have lunch or let's meet after work and so you could glean from the conversation when someone actually needs your support and when it's just we'll talk that you don't have to
Exactly.
necessarily entertain at that point in time. So the connection is important, the trust is important, and the humility, which I think is the foundation of building that trust, right? Because if you show that you are open to people and willing to listen, right, then you can begin to build the foundations of that trust and have that alignment. So you don't have the 20, 30, and 40% or 50% going in one
Like in
direction,
the other
and
direction.
going to the other one, because that is going to be tough, right?
Yeah.
It is. It is. It makes for very long hours.
Yeah, oh gosh, extra long hours. And yeah, and just yeah, as Georgia said, doubling down on that idea of one size does not fit all.
Right.
And just because you were successful in one way doesn't mean that you have to do exactly the same thing again in another place. So Stephen, thank you for sharing your insights, your experience with us, your stories. We really appreciated it.
Good to
I
have
really
you.
enjoyed this, ladies. Thank you very much for having me here because it sometimes it's a good thing to refresh some of your experiences because then you can use them again when you see them. It becomes second nature to when you're applying them on a daily basis, when you hear about them again, even though they're your own experiences. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
That's so true.
True.
Thank you, Stephen. Wonderful being with you. Thanks again, Emily.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Have a great
I
weekend.
will talk again. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.